Hey everybody, and happy holidays, happy late Christmas, happy early New Year. It's Every Horror Movie on Netflix, that show where we watch, review, and discuss every horror movie on Netflix. I'm Patrick, and I'm back again with my buddies Chris.
It's my birthday.
It's your birthday. Happy birthday. And Steven.
Happy birthday, Chris.
I get the attention.
Yeah, Chris, what is it like to have your birthday on New Year's Eve? Like, do you feel like you get short-shrifted all the time?
Oh man, everyone's like, oh, that's so cool. There's pros and cons, mostly cons. Some of your relatives will combine birthday and Christmas presents. You go to the bar and you're like, it's my birthday, and the bartender's like, I don't have time to worry about that right now. Everyone else has plans on New Year's Eve, so doing anything with people on your actual birthday is hard because they're like, oh, we've had tickets to the champagne room since August. Happy birthday, though.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've done that to you once or twice.
Probably. Yeah.
The champagne room.
Fine.
Is there sex in the champagne room?
I've never been invited, so I don't know.
Okay, just wondering. The question's been on my mind for years.
Yeah.
Well, boys, we're here today for a tradition that has become, dare I say, hallowed at Amon. It's our annual year-end wrap episode where we reflect on the highlights, the lowlights of our horror experience for the past year. We've done this for the past, 2 or 3 years now, I think. And it's always a blast, right?
Yeah, it's always great. We crack open some Old Lang Syne. We spend some time thinking about the most recent year-long leg of our horrifying journey into every horror movie on Netflix. We talk about pop culture outside of Netflix. Imagine that. Mm-hmm. It's always a good time.
Yeah. We're going to give out today 5 different awards. We're going to name our favorite movie that we've watched for the podcast this year, our least favorite movie we watched for the podcast this year, the best new horror film that came out that we saw this year. So that could be an N film, or it could be some other horror film we saw. We're going to name our best horror discovery as far as like any kind of horror media, any horror thing that we discovered and loved this year. But most importantly, we're going to hand out the Spirit of J Award for the character in a movie that we watched for the podcast this year who most exemplified the spirit of our dear favorite character from 1920 London, Fear Strikes Again, Jay. We're going to kind of probably give you a little recap later in the podcast about who Jay is in case you don't know. But that's what we're up to today.
If you don't know who Jay is, you've had a whole pandemic to listen to every goddamn episode of this podcast. You're doing life wrong, buddy.
Well, regardless, even for those who are doing life so drastically wrong, we're still going to give you a little recap later in the show. But before we get into the awards, I'm just kind of curious how you guys would reflect on our past year of Amon, because as I was looking back on it, I was like, this has been a solid-ass year. We watched some classics. I actually had a difficult time picking my favorite movie. I feel like we had a pretty damn solid year of watching every horror movie on Netflix.
I feel similarly. I mean, I think the lows were, down there with the lowest of Amon lows over the past however many years we've been doing this. But the highs were, I felt a lot of joy reflecting on this, I'll say that. We watched a lot of stuff that is sort of outside of our usual purview or what we normally get or got when we were going A to Z through the alphabet. We watched a lot of Stone Cold classics, a couple of franchises, some more recent critically acclaimed films that at least I hadn't seen for whatever reason. It's been an interesting year, for sure.
Yeah, looking at the list, to be honest, I would have to characterize Amon this year for me as being somewhat absent-minded, I guess. I had a lot going on this year. I was running for office, actually, so, I was very distracted for most of the year. I missed a couple episodes, largely because of that. And, so a lot of the stuff I remember watching, but man, just a lot of the stuff didn't stick in my brain as long as the movies from previous years. And also on top of that, just the craziness that's been this year and all the stuff that's been going on, lots of distractions this year.
Man, it's been weird for me. I've been, my memory gets worse with every year. And so as I was preparing for this episode, I was listening back to a few old episodes to, quite frankly, remind myself what some of these movies even were, because I had forgotten. And it was very weird listening back and like our first couple episodes of the year being able to hear us in the same room as each other.
Right.
and then when we were on that like shitty Zencaster platform where we all sounded like shit for the first few episodes of the pandemic when we were still trying to figure out the remote recording situation. I don't know. It was just a weird kind of time capsule of a time that's still so recent, but I don't know, that was a strange and slightly traumatic journey to relive that.
But it's okay. This is the last day of 2020. The calendar's going to change to 2021 and everything's going to be great. Right?
Everything's going to be fine.
Everything's going to change January 1st.
Every horror movie on Netflix is now going to be a Criterion film.
Well, I wanted to kind of jump on what you were just saying, Patrick, about doing this remotely, and I think this year more than ever I've listened back to episodes more often, and it's really kind of jarring, the transition that many people around the world have had to endure of trying to figure out how to do things remotely. But it's interesting too to hear kind of our energy levels ebb and flow episode to episode based on what was going on in the world, what was going on in our personal lives. I know, like, I can hear a dip where I sound much more depressed and unenthused than usual, and that's been kind of a really, I think, healthy way for me to reflect on just this year in general. The fact that we have these podcasts as sort of like podcast episodes as sort of like mile markers throughout this really crazy year.
It's the little metronome for our life.
Yeah, when I was listening back, it was funny. I think maybe I feel like it was not the first episode after like the stay home order came down here in Michigan, but the second one, oh my God, we all sounded like somebody had just dragged us out of bed or out of a coffin or something. It was like, yeah, I remember that time. I remember how that felt,
Yeah, and listeners might not know that, back in the before times, like, not only would we get together in a room to record the show, but, we would have a drink or two beforehand. We usually had an activity planned afterward. And, it's just been kind of interesting to hear how this dynamic has changed now that we just literally cannot spend that physical time with each other surrounding recording the show.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, and I mean, this may be like all too inside baseball and not even stuff that needs to make it into the show, but the weird thing is that I'm so accustomed to this model of doing it remotely now. I'm almost like, why are we all going to like drive and like set up our equipment when we could just like sit down in our bedrooms and do this for the rest of the foreseeable future? I mean, we can hang out whenever we want post-COVID, but like when we need to record one of these, why not just do it like this? I feel like it's almost permanently reshaped the way I think about doing this.
There's definitely pros and cons to doing it this way. I mean, it's certainly much easier, less of a pain in the ass. Those marathon sessions where we would record an episode or 2 episodes sometimes and then like set up the equipment, tear down the equipment, try to go to the bar and muster up enthusiasm to do anything else. Kind of difficult. But on the other hand, there's less incentive for me to like wake up before I do the show now. It's like I took a shower today. I kind of got dressed today. Didn't shave. But it's like if I actually were seeing people and like going out, I'd put a little more spring in my step, and that'd probably make for a better show.
Well, a phrase Chris likes to use is crawling to the finish line like sacks of shit. Sometimes over the course of these episodes, we just become a little bit drunk and usually exhausted with talking about the movie for so long. But I feel like because of the pandemic, and again, like Chris, I can just roll out of bed and everything's right here and set up. Like I'm going across the starting line like a sack of shit a lot of the time lately.
All right. Well, let's delve into the meat of this whole experience and start handing out some awards. I think we should start with the good stuff. Start with something exciting. Do y'all want to hand out your awards for the best Amon movie of 2020?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
All right, who wants to go first? Chris, you both had very enthusiastic responses, but Chris came in first, so how about Chris goes first?
Yeah.
So the best movie I watched for Amon this year was a movie that I had not seen before, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had never really had a reason to watch it, and until we did the episode on it, and yeah, it was not what I was expecting, and I would say lives up to the hype, and so I feel like a better horror fan having seen it, and I would recommend it to people in the future.
Chris,
God
oh my
bless.
gosh. You're one step closer to becoming a Toby Hooper super fan like me. In a matter of months, you're going to have a Funhouse t-shirt like I'm wearing right now. Very happy to hear that that's your favorite of the year. That's awesome.
Yeah.
God bless. Yeah, I'm so glad we got to watch that this year. Steven, what's your pick for best Amon movie of the year?
So my pick is Green Room, which is a movie I had been aware of for a long time before. I somehow had not seen it, even though I like Jeremy Saulnier's films, the other two that I had seen. It was a really deeply unpleasant experience, but sometimes that's what I'm looking for in horror. I have to say, that movie, I watched it right before we recorded, and that was early in the days, I think back in mid-March, maybe, at the beginning of this pandemic.
That was early quarantine,
Yeah. So, I was super depressed and on edge and anxious, more so than usual, and I watched this movie on a rainy, kind of Pacific Northwestern-y looking day right before we recorded the episode, and I was on the edge of a panic attack almost the whole time, and that movie has stuck with me ever since. There are moments like Anton Yelchin getting his arm ripped to shreds outside the door that I will just never be able to shake. It's not a film I think I would ever watch again. It's a hard movie to recommend, but as far as, I guess I'm choosing it as my favorite Amon movie of the year because I think it had the biggest impact on me of anything that we've seen, and I think it speaks the most to how I was feeling during this weird pandemic year.
I love that. I also feel some degree of relief because I remember feeling bad because, as you just stated, that movie took a toll on you and you definitely expressed it in the episode. And I was like, shit, I ruined Steven's life. I ruined Steven's early stay home order. But I'm glad that in the long run it had it left a positive impression.
The last thing I want to add to this is actually it was kind of like affirming as well for me as a horror fan because I feel like I can't get shaken like that anymore. I'm constantly searching for the next high, the next movie that's actually going to make me feel threatened or frightened, and I was feeling pretty jaded going into that movie, and it reawoke something in me. So I think that's kind of beautiful, even though I did go through hell for a couple of days trying to recover from it.
Now you're talking about Amon movie that you had not seen before, right? Because we also watched Poltergeist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right, yeah, there's lots of great... We've watched a lot of great movies, a lot of kind of legacy horror classics, but I wanted to pick something that I saw fresh for Amon.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking as well.
But to be clear, the award, the rules are it can be best Amon movie. That's the only stipulation. You can interpret it however you want.
Yeah, we don't have any rules or bylaws for this thing.
No. Which I definitely took some liberties with for my pick for best Amon movie because we watched so many amazing movies this year. We watched Texas Chainsaw, we watched Poltergeist, which are both incredible movies that I love. The Golem was incredible. Nong Nok was incredible. The Devil's Advocate were all on my short list. I loved them all. But my pick for best Amon movie of the year is a movie that for me sort of exemplified the experience, the ideal experience that I think we should be having with this whole adventure. And that pick is Would You Rather. Would You Rather is the just quintessential, we all went into it, I think, with pretty low expectations.
Sure.
Steven picked it essentially randomly because it was the last title in the alphabet that was on Netflix, and we were all like, okay, that looks sort of interesting. And not only did the movie itself kind of exceed my expectations, but as I talked about it with you guys in the episode, I was like, all right, this left me with a lot to chew on, and I enjoyed it even more as we discussed it. So while obviously Texas Chainsaw and Poltergeist are better movies that I will probably revisit more often than Would You Rather, that was just the ideal Amon movie to me as far as just genuinely surprising me and giving me an experience that was delightful and thought-provoking and horrifying, and an experience that I probably would never have had if not for this adventure. So
I appreciate your the sort of ethos in your pick there, Patrick, because I felt similarly about that movie, which is it's proof that there are still diamonds in the rough in the Netflix horror category. I lose sight of that sometimes because we do go for long stretches where we watch just complete bullshit, and that was a welcome surprise. Again, just chosen purely at random.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I thought of picking Would You Rather, actually, too, for the reasons that you mentioned, because it is really the archetypical Amon movie. It's the reason why we do this show, even though we don't realize it very often.
Yeah. Well, speaking of movies that maybe give us less reason to want to do this show, I feel like we should get into our worst Amon movies of the year. Steven, do you want to lead off on this one since Chris did the last one?
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear if either of you picked the same movie. I'd prefer if you take the path of just playing along and then announcing it as your pick, and then we can just talk about it all over again. I think that'd be very funny. But mine was The Haunting of Molly Hartley. Okay. Primarily because I'd completely forgotten about this movie. Of course, I would have seen it looking back over the list. But when we were having preliminary discussions about this episode, I think, Patrick, you texted us, like, what the fuck was Haunting of Molly Hartley?
Yes.
And I struggled. The only detail I could remember was that there is a weird baptism scene in a church that has a small wading pool, like, behind the altar. That's all I remember about this movie, except as time has gone on, it's been a couple of weeks since that discussion. The only other thing I remember is how fucking pissed off the lead actress's performance made me watching that movie. It's just one of the most dead-eyed, wooden, lifeless performances I've ever seen.
Would you rank it more or less dead-eyed, lifeless, and wooden than Brahms, the boy in The Boy?
Oh, more all of those. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She was terrible. I think Keith Phipps, writing for the AV Club, I remember at the time we watched that movie, I looked up a review, and he described her as a super waif, which I thought was hilarious.
I don't remember that movie. I gave it a cue it, though. I remember it not being that bad.
Holy shit, I am fascinated by this phenomenon that apparently none of us really remembered this movie. Because I tend to think that's just me, because my memory is legitimately terrible. And I was like, I felt really bad about that movie and several others we watched this year, where I was just like, what was that movie? I listened to the whole Molly Hartley episode to try and refresh my memory, and succeeded only marginally.
You know, sometimes I think that is a valid function of our podcast. I know we do get too bogged down in the plot sometimes, but that's the kind of movie where that's what you need out of a podcast episode. Just like that's the kind of thing that just goes in one ear and out the other. How did you feel listening back to that episode, Patrick? Did you feel like it was a satisfactory recap?
I mean, it jogged my memory a little bit.
That's probably the best we could do with the material.
The main highlight was the church architecture. We talked about church architecture a lot.
Oh, that's right. And our friend Dan, also an avid listener of the show, did confirm for me that there are churches that have pools behind the altar for baptism.
Yeah, that's a thing, because I saw a house for sale somewhere in the country, and it was like a labyrinthine house that was like being used by people to like store inventory for like their eBay store.
Oh, Chris,
or something.
I did the whole walkthrough. That was amazing. Yeah.
Yes. And that was an old church. It was a converted church. And the bathroom, what is now the bathroom, was the little baptismal pool area behind the altar. Really wild. So yeah, it's real.
Well, this is a good segue, because one of the things that I learned from listening back to that episode was that I not only gave that movie a screw it, but also made the bold claim that I thought it might have been the worst movie we had watched for Amon in general, which stunned me. I was like, I didn't remember enjoying the movie, but I didn't remember hating it that much. So, I mean, I feel like my worst of the year should be that, but I just don't remember. So because I'm senile, my pick for worst Amon movie of 2020 is Hubie Halloween. You know what? Chris always says first time you watch a movie is a flirt, second time you watch a movie is a date. I watched Hubie Halloween twice.
You poor fucker.
The first, sure, was a flirt. The second was a hate.
You just think you just won't let it happen. You just gotta let it happen.
You know what? I was in.
You're watching it. You're like, I'm too smart for this movie. I don't enjoy this movie.
No. I was having some beverages the first time I watched it. I was in a state to enjoy it.
Oh, and I was cackling with laughter most of the time, too, next to you.
I was flanked by Steven and Allison, who were both enjoying it at least for the first half hour or so. And I was just like, this is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen. It's terrible. It's a piece of garbage. I'm so upset that I've spent 3 hours of my life on it now, or 4 hours, or however long it was.
You're still spending your time on it, actually, by discussing it right now. It's haunting you.
And this is the final 10 seconds I'm spending on it. I'm done. I'm done with you, Hubie. I forsake you. Chris, tell us what your worst Amon movie of the year was.
All right, well, I'm going to play a deep cut.
Oh, boy.
You know, we watch every Final Destination movie for this show.
Oh, wow.
And I think the worst movie I watched this year for Amon is The Final Destination, Final Destination 4.
That's a fucking bad
racetrack movie theater one.
Yeah.
Dear God.
That was a low point of the year for me. I thought about it for a minute when I was coming up with my pick.
Yeah.
Is that the one with the tanning bed scene?
No, hell no. That's Final Destination 3, the good one.
Yeah, that's the roller coaster one.
No.
Yeah.
What's in the Final Destination?
The Final Destination.
Is that the bridge one?
No, that's Final Destination 5. The Final Destination is the one that starts with NASCAR. Has the gratuitous racist tow truck driver.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Has the bathtub falling through the floor. Has the movie theater that explodes at the end.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's horrible.
Yeah, that was the one that was. I think that I thought 3 came out in 3D, but it didn't, and then 4 actually was the first 3D entry in the franchise, right? And they tried to maximize the 3D potential with a Sci-Fi Channel original movies budget. It was just so ugly and awful to look at.
And I'm objectively correct because that's the only movie that got 3 screw-its from us. Or I should say Universal.
Of the franchise, you mean?
Yeah, Universal. No, of every movie we've watched this year for Amon.
Oh, wow.
The Universal screw-its on that movie only.
That's wild. I can't believe we haven't aligned on 3 screw-its for any other movie.
Yeah, so.
Damn.
But that was, not good.
Yeah, I worked hard to shoehorn Final Destination into my awards this year because my memories of that experience are great. I had fun watching those movies. I had fun talking about them. But yeah, spoiler alert, couldn't find any awards for them this year.
I'd like to mention a kind of runner-up for worst movie. And I would be amazed. I mean, Chris, you've got the website open, so you can tell us how we rated this. Death House.
Ah, yes. A
Death House is up there with one of the most punishing film watching experiences I've ever had in my life. I mean, that thing didn't have a plot to speak of. It felt like it was held together with duct tape and gum. Awful. Just awful.
That was a shit show. It was at least a memorable shit show, though.
All I remember is fucking the actor from Hills Have Eyes, whose name I'm forgetting right now for some reason.
Michael Berryman.
I remember him wearing his video game spacesuit sort of thing with the light up shape on the front of it, and Tony Todd at the end.
Yes,
that's all. That is
and
all
the beginning.
I remember. Yeah,
completely unrelated framing sequences.
Well, we're still apparently getting a sequel, which will hopefully explain the mythos of Tony Todd's character, because that's what we all really want.
That would have got 4 screw-its, except I was the fly in the ointment. I gave it a cue-it because it was just so bizarrely constructed and such a unique experience that I I got something out of just watching how broken it was in such a bizarre way I had never encountered before.
Respect.
You know, I wonder, I do want to add one more thing to this bad Amon movie experience before we move on, but, you know, I'm a fan of kind of gonzo, bad, rediscovered cult movies. They're hit or miss, but I feel like I have more fun if I'm going in knowing that, like, a large group of nerds have loved this movie and championed it for so long that it builds up a reputation, and then a company actually has to go to work to like restore it and put it out somewhere on Blu-ray or on VOD or whatever. Sometimes I wonder if some of these movies that we do on Netflix will achieve that status in like the next 10 years. Like I could see Death House being like a future cult classic that people will have much more fun with because they're going in knowing kind of what it is and what to expect from it.
Yeah. Oh, I could see that. And that plays into my theory that I outline probably too often about how like so many of these movies that we think are shitty now are probably going to get the like cult like horror re-release in another couple of decades, and everybody's going to treat it as a lost classic when we know that it actually sucks.
But we can be on the special features of the Blu-ray. Because we were there at the beginning at ground zero for Death House, baby.
I think that there are movies that will achieve cult status in the future. Maybe a movie like, you know, Girl on the Third Floor or something like that. I can see how in a life as a cult movie. Death House specifically, I think, tried so hard to be a cult movie that it doesn't work. You can't be like, oh, guess what? We're going to cast all these cult horror actors and have a built-in audience there. I don't know. It's insincere to me.
It is a bit insincere, but I can still see in 20 years that having some kind of a following.
But I think a lot of cult followings are insincere. Frankly, a controversial horror opinion, but I think people often like a movie because they want to fit in with a community rather than whether it's a good movie. Yeah.
Well, our definitions of a good movie. We don't need to get into the Dial Code Santa Claus /
that's what I'm
Deadly
thinking
Games
of.
discussion here.
All right. Well, on that note, let's get back to movies that we did like. Let's talk about our best new horror movie that we saw this year. So again, that could include a Netflix film that we saw this year that came out in 2020, but also this kind of opens up the playing field to include any horror movie that was released this year that we loved. And I feel like I want to call on Steven here because I know you've got a list, man.
It's kind of crazy. Like, thinking back on this year, it seems like, you know, everything was at a standstill, including the entertainment industry, and really a lot of stuff came out, and a lot of it was quite good. You know, of course, these were mostly films that had a planned theatrical release. A couple of them on my list were theatrical releases, like right before COVID, but they got like pulled from theaters 2 weeks in or whatever. I'm thinking of like The Invisible Man and Underwater, which I loved Underwater. I don't know if you guys have rented that yet, but it's pretty fun. But really, like a lot of really good stuff came out, and it kind of surprised me. So I'm gonna tell you my pick in a minute. I'm gonna run down this list of 14 other movies, and I'm not gonna describe them. I'm not gonna describe them at all. But these are movies that I really enjoyed this year.
Wait, are you not exaggerating? You're actually gonna give us 14 movies?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a list of 14 movies, and
all right,
I highly recommend them all. A couple of them are horror adjacent, but it just amazes me that like I can't think of like a normal year without a pandemic where I have that many movies to draw from to make like even a top 5 out of.
So wait, do you have a favorite?
I do have a favorite.
Okay. Yeah, he's given us the 14. He's given us the top 15. He's going to list 14, and then he's going to talk up the number 1, right?
Okay, Barack Obama.
I know, I'm doing exactly what you told me not to do, Chris. So, okay, movies I really enjoyed this year that are all still available on streaming. So, Relic, Underwater, which I already mentioned, His House, Scare Me, which I know you saw as well, Chris, VFW, Come to Daddy, The Devil All the Time, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is hardly horror, but the book is. Porno, which I just saw recently on Shudder. Lose, a German film that really came out 2 years ago, but didn't hit streaming in the US until this year. Blood and Flesh, The Real Life and Ghastly Death of Al Adamson. Amazing documentary on Shudder that involves UFOs of all things, in addition to horror history. Daniel Isn't Real. Scream Queen, which I forgot technically came out this year, the documentary about Mark Patton.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And Spiral, another Shudder pick. But,
From the Book of Saw?
not that one. I guess there were 2 Spirals this year. I should have clarified. No, this is the kind of queer folk horror movie that came out. I know your favorite genre, Chris.
There were 3 Spirals. There was also our collective spiral into madness. But please continue.
I at the risk of sounding basic, though, the 15th film, my favorite of the year, was The Invisible Man.
Okay.
Just an incredible piece of work. It was the last movie I saw in theaters, right before lockdown. I think that was only out for 2 weeks, and then there was the whole controversy about people having to pay $20 to rent it at home, which is ridiculous. That anyone would complain about that for a new feature. And I've seen it, I think, 3 times now. I know I watched it once with you, Patrick, and a crew, and the tension still held up, even on a third viewing. It's a really, really masterful film. At the time, it was the timeliest possible horror concept you could imagine, before the coronavirus took over. It was very much a kind of Me Too sort of film. And it's really stuck with me. It's one that I think I will revisit again. It has me a little bit hopeful that Universal can maybe actually revive some of the other classic monsters in just as appealing and fresh a way as that film. So, The Invisible Man, my favorite modern contemporary horror film of 2020. Chris, what you got?
I hate to sound basic as well. It feels like a really basic pick, but yeah, The Invisible Man. I gotta go with The Invisible Man, and a lot of it is because I didn't watch a lot of stuff this year for reasons I've already articulated. I heard a lot of good buzz about a lot of stuff that came out on VOD that I really meant to check out, and maybe will now that I have more time. But yeah, I was one of those who paid the $20 to watch The Invisible Man on VOD the first time. I since bought the Blu-ray. I've watched it at least once since then.
Nice.
And it's great. It's there's something really elegant about The Invisible Man where, it's not trying too hard to be ambitious. It's just a small budget, really well executed movie that brings the spooks, riffs on a familiar concept, manages to be about something without taking away from the entertainment.
Sure.
And yeah, it gives me a lot of optimism for the future of the Universal franchise and our new Australian film master, Lee Winnell.
He's Australian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Patrick, what do you got?
Well, so I had sort of the inverse experience that Steven did this year as far as partaking in new movies. So much was dropped online, and weirdly, I didn't watch a lot of it, and not even just in the horror sphere, but I still haven't seen Tenet. I still haven't seen Da 5 Bloods. I still haven't seen, a lot of notable movies that have come out online this year, and it just is puzzling to me because I'm one of those people who goes and sees whatever is like a big deal at the theater, usually the weekend it comes out, and all this stuff was at my fucking fingertips, and I don't know, I was preoccupied with shows and older movies, and I don't know, it was a strange phenomenon. So essentially, I think there were only 3 movies that I saw that came out in 2020 that at least are in the running for me. Invisible Man is certainly one of them. Loved it. But I guess I'm going to kind of give this in some sort of weird tie to Hairwolf, which I called out on the show, a few months ago. An awesome short set in a black barbershop where zombie-like white people start trying to invade the barbershop. Fucking loved that shit. It was funny. It was spooky. It was colorful, like really interestingly shot, and had some, a lot, not just some, political text to it. But I'm going to split that with I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which it's not a perfect film. It's flawed, but goddamn is it wild and adventurous and a really ambitious attempt to adapt a very idiosyncratic and difficult book, which I also enjoyed. As Steven said, maybe it's not quite horror. It certainly is horrifying at various points. And man, it was an experience for sure. So again, not necessarily the most competitive race for me this year, but that's what I got.
Well, I think I'm thinking of Ending Things is up there in a lot of film critics' top 10 lists of just films in general. It's not really showing up on horror lists. But I agree with you, Patrick. I mean, the novel is pretty straightforward. It's a pretty lean thriller. Yeah, there's some twists and turns, but there's a logic to it. And Charlie Kaufman, doing his Charlie Kaufman thing, just unpacks almost every sentence of that book and breaks it open into a world of very strange filmic and genre possibilities. And I enjoyed the exercise. I thought it was a really wild take on a novel that I really love, that I only read this year anticipating the film, but not a film that I know that I would ever watch again.
I also found it interesting that he finds a lot more feminist subtext in the story and manages to give that lead character a lot more agency. That was just, even outside of the political considerations of it, I just thought was an interesting exercise narratively. And it's so difficult. We don't need to get into it right now, but also it's just so difficult to discuss it any more deeply without spoiling elements of it. But he really does some interesting things with it narratively, besides the flashy additions that he makes.
Well, we did set the precedent when this first came out that we are not allowed to talk about this movie at length on the podcast.
Yeah. So let's consign it to the general ash heap of 2020 and move on to our best horror discovery of this year. I think if y'all will allow it, I will go first on this one.
Sure, go for it.
My best horror discovery of this year was The Car, Road to Revenge. And this is another example of sort of that Amon effect for me, because if anyone listened to our episode about The Car, Road to Revenge, you'll know I watched the movie 1.5 to 2 times and did not enjoy it. And was not highly engaged in that conversation and was perhaps most negative of anybody. But also, again, if you've been listening this year, you'll know that the director of the film, G.J. Echternkamp, reached out to us. He very openly admitted to getting drunk one night, Googling his own movie, listening to our podcast, being kind of pissed at our kind of unforgiving take on it. But then he also said, hey, I want to tell you my side of the story. And we had an amazing conversation with him that was, to me, extremely illuminating, not just as far as what happened with this specific movie, but illuminating as far as the movie business in general and how some of these movies that we love to at times deride wind up getting made. It was just a great exercise in empathy for me that made me appreciate this guy who I talked shit about for an hour so much more, and made me appreciate the, yes, extremely flawed movie that he made a lot more. There's lots of things that I discovered this year that I enjoyed a lot. There were things on my short list. Dragula kind of saved my life at a certain point in the pandemic. But yeah, I'm so glad that we happened upon this movie, and even in a way glad that we talked some shit about it and that the director showed up to kind of set us straight on some things. It was a great and very educational, humbling experience.
I love that pick, and I have very fond memories right now of, I had like a week in my life where G.J. Echternkamp was really kind of at the center of my daily comings and goings. I was, preparing for that interview with him, where I didn't end up saying a lot, but I ended up watching his, and I can't think of the title right now. It's on Netflix, though. His documentary about coming back home after college with his family, which was fucking fascinating. And then after the interview with him, I think literally the next day I watched his own fictionalized version of that story as well, which I think is still on Netflix. Frank and Cindy, yeah.
Yes.
Both amazing films, and again, I just enjoyed spending kind of 3 or 4 days in the world of this guy who would otherwise just be somebody with 4 IMDb credits who made a terrible movie. I thought it was so awesome that he reached out to us. He was so cool. I feel like I learned a lot about not just the film industry, but the streaming business as well from speaking with him that made me perhaps more kind to some other films that we've reviewed on Netflix since speaking with him. So
yeah, I think it's another thing that kind of exemplifies the point of what we're doing here in general, because like, what are we doing here? We're everybody has Netflix. People who like horror movies watch horror movies on Netflix sometimes. And I think, there's this certain amount of mystery about how does this shit wind up out there? Oh, this stuff all sucks. But like, I like that we're learning about how it winds up there, why it winds up there, why these movies were made, how they're made, and, developing some kind of empathy for that process other than, just looking at it as another shovel on the dung heap of the Netflix content pile. There are people making these movies who were trying to do their best and trying to do something fun, and maybe it got fucked over one way or the other, and we all owe them some more empathy. God damn it, I would love to see GJ's The Car Road to Revenge, because the way he described it sounded amazing.
Release the actor camp cut, damn it.
Yes.
That's why, for as much shit talking as we do, I think it's rare that we screw a movie with prejudice, really. Like, when we say that movie was made by bad people and it shouldn't exist. Right. There's been a couple of those for me, for sure. But, for the most part, the bad movies are movies where, God bless everyone involved, but not this time.
All right. Well, Chris, what was your horror discovery of 2020?
It's pretty thin. I didn't discover a whole lot. So I'm going to bend the rules a little bit. The short answer to the question is I'll plug Resident Evil 2 again, the video game, the remake.
Oh, yes.
I spoke about that last episode for a little bit. Good fun game, good romp. Really immersed me for 10 hours or however long it took me to finish the main campaign. Good spooky game.
For a minute, I thought you were saying your horror discovery was Resident Evil Afterlife, because I listened back to our episode on that,
yes.
And I got really excited for a minute.
Well, actually, I would include that as well. Resident Evil 2, the film, which I watched as prep work for our Resident Evil Apocalypse episode. No, which one did we watch?
The one we watched.
We watched Afterlife, though. Good one is Apocalypse, which is the second in the series. Y'all should watch that. It was highly entertaining as an action movie.
Not gonna happen.
I want to. It sounds cool.
Yeah, check it out. But I'm also going to plug something that I don't think I've talked about on this show yet, which I think I actually discovered last year, but it technically came out this year, so we could call it a 2020 discovery. This video game called Dreams, which both of you are familiar with.
Yeah.
It's kind of the successor to Little Big Planet, if you're familiar with that. Basically, the premise is the players are in control of building their own games, 3D games, whatever. And you go online through your PlayStation and you browse the creations of thousands and thousands of people who are playing this game around the world. And I was trying to use it to make like a horror game. That didn't work. It didn't work out for me. But you can go on there and like search horror and like just see all these like really primitive horror games just created by ordinary people in their basements. And they're really primitive sometimes, but it's just really kind of fun. It's kind of like a poetry slam or something about horror done through the medium of video games. And I've had a lot of fun just like pulling up a random level and being like, oh wow, cool. They have me like, waking up to a bump in the night in the house and I got to go downstairs and like, oh no, the TV just turned on. And sometimes it's a good execution, sometimes it's not, but it's always delightful to see the weird stuff that people come up with in this game. And sometimes like intensely personal stuff. Steven, do you remember that level we played? Patrick, were you there too? I don't know. That level where it was like the Museum of Pain.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Holy shit.
Yeah,
that sounds amazing.
Or the Museum of Sorrow or something like that. This guy had just he was taking submission ideas from the internet and basically making statues around these ideas and these different definitions of pain and sorrow. And you would walk through and you would listen to his voiceover, explaining all of them. And it was really it was this guy's therapy, just all in the open.
I was worried about him.
Yeah.
I wish he'd dropped his phone number in the description somewhere so I could give him a call and check in, maybe recommend a therapist. But yeah, that was pretty wild. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before.
That's it. That's what you get on Dream, stuff you've never seen anything like before. And I spend a lot of time searching for horror themes, and always an interesting time. And it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes to play one of these things.
Do you have to buy Dreams or
yes.
Is there a way to browse it? Okay, you have to own it. Okay, got it. All right, Steven, what was your horror discovery of 2020?
Again, this was a topic that I kind of struggled with. The more initially I was I don't have one. And then the more I thought about how I've spent my time over this past year, especially just early on, kind of comfort buying stuff on the internet just to have it and experience it at some point while I'm stuck in my apartment. But there was a lot, but I'll whittle it down to two things. One is the movie Possession, the Andrzej Zulawski film. He's a Polish director. I think it's his only English language movie. It stars Sam Neill. It's, it kind of plays he's Polish, but it plays a French art film version of a David Cronenberg movie. And it's a movie that is just unlike anything else I have ever seen or that you will probably ever see. I don't know that it's good, but it is consistently entertaining, thought-provoking, harrowing. I mean, it's about the dissolution of a marriage, and the wife is fucking an alien in this seedy, nasty sort of Last Tango in Paris looking flat. Wild movie with incredible creature effects that you will never be able to scrape from your brain, done by Carlo Rambaldi, who designed E.T. So he went from cute alien to evil alien pretty quick for this one. The other one is a podcast. I want to give a shout out, I've been meaning to for the last couple episodes, to the Horror Queers podcast on the Bloody Disgusting Network. Two fabulous gay men talking about horror through a queer lens. They pick some pretty off the beaten path films sometimes, and I think they're both really smart, really funny folks who I've enjoyed listening to these last couple of months. And there's a lot of talk about cum on that podcast. I don't know if that's the main draw for me or not, but they're very frank about their feelings about cum. So that's Horror Queers.
I was known for talking about cum a lot on this podcast at a certain point.
Probably twice as much as actually made it through the edit.
Yeah. Well, the thing I appreciate about their show is they hold nothing back. There are some kind of classic canonical episodes where one of them is blind drunk by the end of it. And I know I've been there on this show. And it's kind of refreshing just to hear what the sense of humor that they have about just being as open and themselves as possible while discussing these movies and not worrying about embarrassing themselves too much.
The statute of limitations is up, so if you want to hear Steve get wasted and the rest of us try to pretend he's not, go listen to Booth Not.
Oh yeah, dark times.
I don't remember this, but I will now.
I was like Captain Sully just trying to land the plane on the Hudson.
I don't know if this is possible, but I remember feeling like I was blacking out during that episode.
Jesus.
The worst of it got cut. So
That's
you
great.
trying to articulate the name of the Panther Prin trilogy or whatever.
Oh, Pather Panjali, I can say it now.
Yeah, Panther Panjali trilogy. You were trying to say Panther Panjali trilogy. It was a non-starter.
It's hard. To be fair, it's hard to say sober.
Well, anyway.
All right. Love it. Definitely have to check out Horror Queers. I've been wanting to check out Possession for a long time. I think we're going to have Chris and I are going to have a little fight over your Blu-ray of that, Stephen.
Yeah.
But let's get down to the final, dare I say, most important award of this show every year, the Spirit of J Award.
so excited.
It's when we give out an award to the character in a movie we watched for Amon who most represented the spirit of Jay, the penniless shepherd demon hunter from 1920 London, Fear Strikes Again, which I think was the third movie we ever watched for this podcast, maybe.
Sounds about right.
We're going to drop in the traditional audio of us explaining Jay for the first time so that y'all have a little context.
Let's not drop it in. Let's just explain Jay.
Oh. But that explanation is so good. We put it in the last 2 year-end wraps, and it's so funny. Like it fully explains the energy and the excitement we had about Jay.
That only the two of you really share, I think, at this point. It should be noted.
No, that's the funniest part about it, is that at the end you come in and you're like, "Oh, by the way, everything I said before when I was criticizing this movie was not about Jay. Jay's amazing."
I mean, that was like 3 years ago at this point. My love for Jay has waned, but I love that we have an award for him. He holds a special place in my heart, even if I don't appreciate him in the same way I once did.
So are you not dropping in the audio then?
I don't care. Whatever's better.
You know what? Fuck it. Drop it in now.
And then Jay shows up.
Cut to Jay.
In like the most badass intro shot of all time. A fucking camel, the silhouette of a camel walks across the screen in the foreground as Jay does like this typical like American like action movie badass stride out of the fucking forest.
Like 2 earrings, tan suit, open collar, like 4 necklaces.
Also, we should note this is the character who is a quote-unquote penniless shepherd, as we're told multiple times after
I
this.
just want to chime in and say briefly that I wasn't complaining about Jay. I should have made that clear. Jay is amazing.
Jay's amazing.
Which is bizarre because
star.
in reviews from India, everyone shits on Jay, the actor who plays him. Like, they did not like, but I think, I don't know, there's something relatable. He's
great. He's just a natural star. He just has that
star.
like
beautiful. He has great charisma.
And he's super charismatic.
Say what you want about the stylistic excess of Bollywood stuff, but like his intro and it's like the music's going crazy and it's like slow-mo, a bunch of cuts, crazy zooms on him like coming into the palace. Like hell yeah, it's like how you would walk out for WWE or something.
Like midnight blue backdrop and he's lit in this gold light. It's like a comic book. It's very comic booky.
Yeah.
All right, so that's Jay, and hopefully this has been an illuminating moment if you're one of those people who like every so often hears this music cue or hears us talk about Jay and you're like, what the fuck are they talking about? That's what it is. Go watch 1920 London, Fear Strikes Again. You will not be disappointed, at least according to me and Chris. And at the very least, you won't be disappointed by Jay. But anyways, every year we hand out this award. It's produced some shocking reactions or shocked reactions in past years, so it's always a good time. Any volunteers? Who wants to go first? Who most exemplified the spirit of Jay in movies we watched for this podcast in 2020?
I'm still trying to decide, to be honest.
Steven, do you have one? I mean, I can go too.
I have one. You know, it's a name that I kind of wanted to make like a word game out of this and get you guys to guess it. But we'll just skip right to it. I'm going to go with Clear Rivers from the Final Destination franchise.
Yes! Dude, I was thinking about that. Oh my God. Wow. I'm so excited.
That's a good pick. That's a good pick.
I mean, talk about, Jay was a penniless shepherd. This is like a young, teenage girl.
They both did time.
She's a young teenage girl who like kind of has like left her family to go off on her own, and she's edgy and she's witchy and she's just fucking cool. I don't know. She's like she's a bright spot in that franchise, and she's one of the few characters that is featured in the first 2 films of the franchise before she dies a very explosive death at the end of the second film.
Well, and she exemplifies the spirit of Jay to me so much because you want to see more of her. I remember being so upset because I was excited when she came back in Final Destination 2 and she's like voluntarily committed to the asylum where she's in a padded room and cannot possibly be touched by death, or so she thinks. And she's just a badass. Like she's a decent protagonist in the first one, then she like is next level in the second one, and then they kill her and you're like, I want more Clear. I want this franchise to revolve around Clear.
I wanted her to be the Heather Langenkamp of the Final Destination franchise. Like I wanted at least one more appearance from her, even if it's like Return of the Jedi, like Ghost from the Grave showing up at the Ewok party or something. Like that would have been cool. I wanted to see her return somehow, but yeah, I'm glad you appreciate that, Patrick. I think.
Have you heard the controversy of Final Destination being censored on Netflix?
I have. I was going to send that to you guys yesterday. So apparently there's a scene where a character, like, mimics being hanged.
He pantomimes hanging himself on the airplane. It's like, oh, you're going to make me do that? I'm going to hang myself. And presumably it's been cut from Netflix and maybe other streaming services, but I've heard Netflix specifically called out.
And that's the character that's the character that dies in the bathtub, right?
By hanging, yeah, because in the first Final Destination, all the characters' deaths are foreshadowed by like visual gags that you would never catch until you watch the movie 4 times.
I don't know about 4 times,
but yeah, apparently they thought it was in poor taste for him to be, pantomiming hanging himself kind of in the moment as a joke. So they left in the gratuitous scene of him actually being hanged,
which was horrifying.
But they cut that out. So that's why we buy our Blu-rays.
Wow.
They'll pry my Blu-rays from my cold, dead hands.
Yeah, don't like that.
Yeah.
All right, Patrick, so you thought about Clear Rivers in preparation for this. Who did you actually pick? Who's the Spirit of Jay?
I did think about Clear Rivers. I thought about a number of characters, but I just... when it comes down to it, the person who most exemplifies the Spirit of Jay for me this year is William Friedkin in The Devil and Father Amort.
Whoa.
You son of a bitch.
I'm trolling.
I bought it. Wholesale.
I mean, you know what? He was certainly a fascinating character in that. But no, I gotta give it to L from Death Note, Lakeith Stanfield. As you know, I stan this character so hard. I stan this performance so hard. And, if you listen to our Death Note episode, you know that I was frustrated to a degree that Lakeith, giving this honestly incredible performance, was kind of trapped in this otherwise fairly mediocre movie. And I don't really want a Death Note sequel, but I do want to see more of Lakeith's L. So that's the Spirit of Jay for me.
Maybe they'll do something like U.S. Marshals, where they have a sequel, but it's not really have anything to do with the main story. It's just the same supported character doing a new thing.
Maybe.
Wow, Patrick, we'll I can think of few characters in our journey so far that are more Jay-like than L. That's an amazing pick. It kind of blew my mind, as you are wont to do with this award.
I do have a history of that. All right, Chris, what do you got?
Well, I was unironically going to say William Friedkin.
Whoa, yes, please.
But I'm gonna change a little bit, because I mean it's to me, the Spirit of Jay is largely about, who's willing to step in the arena and go toe to toe with evil.
Also, it's Father Amort.
Father Amort.
And do it in style. Yeah. So then I got thinking, wait a minute. The J of the Devil and Father Amort is Father Amort. He literally thumbs his nose at the devil. And he has way more liveliness and style than William Friedkin.
I love this.
Dude, I thought about Father Amort too. I'm glad that we were all on sort of the same page in varying ways.
I get it. I hate to say that because that was a documentary. I just kind of wrote it off. When I was trying to figure out who's even eligible for this award, it just didn't make sense to me. But that's fucking brilliant, Chris.
Yeah,
Father Amort.
I mean, an exorcist, and you're not 100% sure if you can trust him. That's Jay.
I also fucking love this motley crew that we have here. I'm just imagining Clear Rivers, L, and Father Amort hanging out, and talk about a movie I want to see.
We need to get the director of Death House to make a movie starring all of the Spirit of Jay award winners from the past 3 years.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I would love that. All right. Well, that's all our awards. I'm honestly extremely sad to say that's all the business we had to do today.
This is the part where we just really rush up and say bye, like at the end of the Oscars, where they're like, best picture. Okay, well, great.
Yeah, we need some play-out music to
then it's the nightly news immediately.
Well, before we go, I will take the opportunity to remind you, as always, to visit our website at everyhorrormovieonnetflix.com, hit the merch store link there, and buy T-shirts or other, various goods and sundries bearing our art. You can also see the list of all the movies we've ever reviewed there and the rankings that we gave them. Follow us on social media at EHMONcast, EHMONcast, and review us or subscribe to us on your podcast provider of choice. We, love to see the feedback. We love to see the subscriptions, and it helps people find the show. But before we wind things down this year, I just want to thank everyone for listening to the show. It means a lot to us. It's honestly very surreal that we've been doing this for 3+ years now, and that some of you are out there listening to it and enjoying it is a little mind-blowing and certainly gratifying, and we appreciate it. And thanks to you guys for another year of doing this shit, talking about movies. It's been a delight, and has certainly helped me get through this whole COVID bullshit.
And if just one of you can come forward and DM us and explain why our Dabe for the Possession cursed toilet video is so popular, please reach out.
We haven't talked about this, I don't think. I don't think we've talked about this on the show.
We have, but there's not a reason to not revisit it.
I mean, talk about horror discovery of the year. So we talked about Dabe, the possession, and the scene where Farouk Kujah pulls the haunted items out from underneath the toilet, and we clipped that and put it on our Facebook page to be like, look at this crazy scene, and it has blown up with people in
how many views does that
people are angry, they're sad, they're happy, they're laughing, they're crying.
People message us and they say, take this down.
People have said we should be jailed for this video.
You should be in jail for this. That's what they say.
How many views does this shit have? I'm looking it up right now.
We get a couple of likes every 2 days on this thing. It's crazy. It has legs. When did we even review that? I mean, it was not this year.
Not this year. No.
It has 157,000 views.
What the fuck?
Holy shit.
For comparison, the full fucking movie seems to also be posted on Facebook by somebody in 2018. It has 218,000 views.
Amazing. Yeah, I think, especially because of the found footage nature of that video, I think a lot of people have watched it and assumed that it is in some way real and don't realize that it's from a movie.
I didn't want to say that, but I think you're right, Patrick. That's I don't know. It's a little bit disconcerting to me that that there's anyone in this entire world that could just think of cheesy found footage clip like that is real, and that that actually believes in curses. But it's possible, and I guess probable, with that many views and these extreme reactions we've had.
Mm-hmm.
They believe it. Someone comment, they were like, "This happened to my aunt" or something like that. Like this actually happened in their family.
Wow.
They'd say, "This is a disturbing clip. You should remove it. There's more crazy people who can learn from it. The cameraman should go to hell."
Oh my god!
Just insanity. But I mean, God bless, this movie must be terrifying to some people out there in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your beliefs. I don't have any, so I can't relate to that. But
oh my god. Well, yes, I gave a very sweet tribute, and I forgot that we had not only Dabe 4 to talk about, but also Chris needs to tell us what we're watching for our next episode.
Oh.
Yeah, Chris has
no idea. He's like, oh, I was.
I'm like, fuck, it's my turn.
Oh shit, I'm gonna spin the wheel. Keep in mind, Chris, this is our first episode of a new year, 2021.
Yeah, I feel like this is really gonna set the pace for all of 2021. It's either gonna be a repeat of 2020.
Yeah, last year you selected The Haunting of Molly Hartley, so start us off on something that we won't both consider for our worst Amon film of 2021.
All right, guys.
You got
this
one?
This might be a controversial pick.
Oh boy!
But we've been talking about 2020, and we were talking about how we've been forced onto recording our show on Zoom. I think we're gonna say goodbye, hopefully, to this period of our lives with Unfriended.
Oh my god. You and I saw this in the theater at a critics screening, if I remember correctly.
Yep, we did. And I said, good for them. And Patrick was like, ah.
Wait, good for who? Like the filmmakers?
Good for everybody.
I was definitely like, eh. I'm looking forward to seeing how I respond to it a second time around.
There's just a complete poker face on Steven's face.
Well, I've never seen it. I know Chris, it's become kind of a meme with you, Chris, over time.
True.
But I feel like I read something recently where it's like now kind of considered to be kind of a recent classic.
Well, everyone went crazy for that Host movie that came out this year on Shudder.
Sure, which that was bullshit.
Which is basically the same concept.
That movie sucked.
And you know what? Whether you love or you hate Unfriended, it has the best movie poster of all time. The movie poster for Unfriended, it's all black. There is a little search bar about a quarter of the way down the poster, and someone's typing Laura Barr, and the Google autocomplete is coming up with Laura Barnes suicide, Laura Barnes party photos, Laura Barnes passed out video, Laura Barnes boyfriend, Laura Barnes bullied, and then Laura Barnes possession. And then at the end it says Unfriended.
That is, I mean, it's like they were tailoring an ad campaign to you, Chris.
I know we were interrupting each other, Patrick, tried to react to that, but like that is Chris dog food if I've ever seen it.
Yes. Like generic Midwestern girl name and like the implication of further high school-esque shenanigans,
and also just the format. It reminds me of like in the Sinister Circle when she's looking at her chart and she almost prescribes 0.5 milligram of Maloc,
which I famously missed that kind of bait and switch there, but great moment regardless.
I'm curious to see this movie again. I remember very little about it. I remember admiring at least the concept, the ambition of the concept, and I'm curious to see how it sits with me this time.
You can't watch it on a TV, though. You got to go into bed with your laptop and watch it on the laptop screen.
I will do that. You know what? I'm actually committing to doing that.
Wait. So I'm going to plead ignorance. What is the format of this? Is it all like FaceTime and shit?
Yeah. It's not just Zoom or just FaceTime, or I think if they use Skype, it's not just the screen of that window. It's kind of her whole computer screen. So
it basically predicted
tabs. COVID. Predicted COVID. But yeah, it's 100% screen capture.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a weird thing to see in a movie theater. Anyways, we'll talk about that on our next episode.
Yeah,
we'll see which of us winds up being unfriended after that discussion.
Yeah, there's only going to be 2 of us after that episode, so, enjoy, cherish this final moment with all 3 of us, because this is it.
All right, that's in 2 weeks. We'll see you then.
All right, Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you, Steven. Thank you, Chris. It's been a good year. Thanks for helping me get through.
Yep.
You're welcome, Patrick. You
anytime.
We love you, listeners. And until we unfriend somebody, I'm Patrick.
I'm Chris.
I'm Steven.
Happy New Year.